You might be wondering to yourself why I look like a Revenant-era Leonardo DiCaprio minus the rugged good looks or actual survival skills. Well, my name's Jesse Driftwood, and I make internet videos. Oh, and don't worry, we'll get back to that fuzzy-headed weirdo in just a minute. This right here is the Insta360 Go2. Honestly, is this audio any good? I don't think this audio is any good. I made a video about this camera a few weeks ago. It's the Insta360 Go2. It's like an action camera, but also like a wearable. It's like a convenience camera, but it can also do action. But here's the problem with that video. It was sponsored by Insta360, which means a few things. One, I only really got to play with it for a week or so before launch day. And two, I'm only highlighting my best experiences, how I feel about it and stuff like that. There's no real way in that amount of time I could properly test and review this. And also, even if I did, how could you believe me if they paid me to make the video? So in this video, I want to tell you all the things I like about it, but more than that, I want to tell you everything I don't like about it, everything I'd like to see them improve, and a little bit of what I'd want to see from Insta360 in the future. So this is that. What do you think best case scenario for getting out to the campsite is from here?
Best case scenario, 2 hours.
Oh, that's not bad. What's worst case scenario?
6 hours.
That's bad. Oh my god! See you, Bonnie. A few weeks ago, some friends and I set out on a 3-day winter backcountry camping trip out in Algonquin National Park here in Canada. And truthfully, I didn't know if I was going to bring any cameras with me or not. See, I was torn between my love of photography, my love of filmmaking, and my love of actually experiencing life without the pressure of sharing my experiences with other people.
I know, I got to the top, I got really mad. That's so much more. Like, it's a substantial amount more.
But then people like my mom and wife and some close friends of mine were asking, you know, are you gonna take any video? Is there anything we're gonna be able to see from this? And I decided, okay, fine. I was gonna bring the Go2 and just whatever the footage looks like, that's what I get. And so that's what I did. And wow, I learned so much about the camera and myself.
Get on over there. All right, I think I'm gonna call filming for the rest of the day. We'll find out tomorrow morning how far we made it. For now, it's probably gonna be too dark to film any minute. I'm also not helping. Sorry, Jeff, I'll help. See you in the morning. Woo! Oh, hey, light me up. Look at this.
On the first morning we woke up at the campsite, I quickly realized that filming in pro mode for the hike in just absolutely guzzled up the built-in 30 gigabytes of storage. This was a problem that I was not prepared for because when I use a camera like this, it's almost always for small bursts or specialty shots. I've never used them as my primary shooting devices. So in order to get around this, I had to connect the camera to my phone and then export all of those clips to my phone so that I could format the camera and move on. You should know this is certainly not a quick process, and it definitely drains the battery on both the camera and your phone. Thankfully, I brought a battery bank, so it wasn't a huge deal, but I did accidentally have my iCloud set to back up all the clips, which just obliterated my data. Most of our day was spent making coffee, food, and finding sticks to keep the fire going. And what I loved about using the Go2 in this environment was that it didn't slow me down. I could actually participate in all the activities and chores and conversations without having to constantly wonder what types of shots I could get or what compositions I was looking for. I could just pull it out of my pocket, point it at something, and that was the shot. On this trip, we experienced almost every type of weather you could imagine, from pouring rain to warm sun, sideways snowstorms, and temperatures reaching as low as -15 before the wind chill. And goodness me, it was windy. The good news is that I didn't have any issues operating the camera in these conditions. The battery didn't seem to drain much through the cold nights, and the display didn't have any weird lags or flickering or anything like that. Just kind of worked as expected. As far as settings are concerned, I pretty much recorded everything in Pro mode with the vivid color and in 30 frames a second. I do kind of want to talk quickly here about frame rates because it illustrates something that I both love and kind of hate about Insta360. So when I asked Insta360 about their choice of frame rates, which is namely 30 frames a second and 50 frames a second, I was told that, well, 60 frames a second isn't possible on the camera just due to heat or power or something like that, which I very much believe because this little camera can get hot. But I was just kind of confused because typically 30 frames a second is an NTSC frame rate and 50 frames a second is a PAL frame rate. So I was asking if there was a possibility to get 24 frames a second and potentially 48 frames a second, which would mean that I could have both the frame rate that I most preferred and also a very easy 2x slow motion option in camera. And Insta360 responded and said, yeah, we can add that in a firmware update. And that right there is the point, which is that Insta360 does add features and firmware updates to fix bugs and stuff like that pretty regularly in my experience with their previous cameras. But also sometimes they can feel kind of slow to actually roll these things out. And it's not just future things, it's sometimes things that were supposed to come with the camera but aren't quite ready yet. But I'm going to touch on that a little bit later. The day just rolled on kind of fantastically. We spent a lot of time laughing together, talking about the world, talking about life, but we also spent a pretty good amount of time alone and in silence to just really appreciate nature, to appreciate our experience. And so for a lot of these times, I would just put the camera down, let it roll a time lapse, and be with my thoughts. As the day came to a close, I found some string tied around a tree from a previous camper, and I figured I should run a time lapse as the sun went down and the stars came out. But back to the firmware issue, this is where I realized that the night lapse or star lapse, I can't remember what they call it, mode that's supposed to be on the camera isn't quite ready yet, which was kind of a bummer because I was really excited to see what the stars looked like because to the eye, they were just stunning. The clips that I got sitting around the fire looked surprisingly not terrible. The low light isn't gonna blow your mind or anything, but in terms of capturing the memories, I'm all right with this. In the Insta360 app, you can choose an AI remove grain function, but I haven't really tested that out because honestly, I don't care much. But if you want to look at the results of that, Phil Bloom put out a fantastic review on his YouTube channel, which covers this amongst many other things. The morning of our third day was spent mostly packing up our site and getting ready for the several-hour hike that was ahead of us.
Off we go. The camera is pretty much out of memory, which is unfortunate, but I don't know. If you see footage after this, we lived.
All right, so my closing thoughts on using this as an adventure filmmaking, memory capturing type camera. I love it. I'd do it again. I would happily choose this camera for my own uses over a GoPro or an Osmo Action or whatever. And that mostly comes down to the form factor. See, because with just the case, I can easily go from filming myself to filming other people. I can take it out and put it on the magnet chest mount or clip it to my head. But the real thing that I love about it is that you have the option of pulling out the little tripod feet, placing it down, and pretty easily getting some static shots maybe as you walk by the camera or sit around the fire or whatever. Now, before this sounds too much like another advertisement, I will say that the form factor, while good, is not perfect. I'm happy that they included these little tripod feet, but they need to be better. I need these to be better. Okay, when you're indoors and you've got flat surfaces like tables all around you, great, put it on a table, get yourself a shot. However, a little bit of wind, just falls over. And that's not even taking into account when you're outside nothing is flat. I was looking at rocks and logs and things like that. On several occasions on this trip, I would come back to the camera after setting up a shot and be left wondering, did that stop recording 10 seconds after it started, or did it stop recording 10 seconds before it finished? You just don't know. Sometimes though, which is kind of funny, because the camera can auto level its horizon, it would fall over, but the composition would just be a little bit different because now the dirt is closer to the lens. As for the case itself and how you interact with it and its features, it's also good and very promising, but it is not yet perfect. So for example, they recently updated the firmware so that when you open it, you can no longer just hit record. You actually have to hit a button that says press to connect. And apparently that was user requested because people were accidentally recording, but like, what? I don't know. That never happened to me. One thing I like about the app is that you can set some user presets. So when the camera's out of the case, 1 tap might be record in pro mode and 2 taps might be take a photo or initiate a slow motion recording. But those presets don't work when you're in the case. You're still subject to the case's settings. So at least how the firmware is right now is that when I want to record, I have to open the camera, hit press to connect, and it'll default into the normal video mode. So then I have to hit the selection button and then again to get over to pro video, and then I can hit record. It's not terrible, but when I first got the camera, I could literally open and hit record. So what I would love more than anything is for the Insta360 app to let me select how the case interacts, because what I want is when I open the case, it's in pro mode and I can just hit record. That would make this camera for me 10 times more useful. 1 times more useful. I don't know the math. I was also asking on my Twitter what people would want to see from an unsponsored updated review about this camera, and I got a lot of responses, half of which were about audio, which we're going to get to in a second because it's a really big deal. I really want to talk about that. And the rest were a mix of workflow. How do you connect it to your phone, the computer? How do you get the clips? All that kind of stuff. So let's start here. Unlike the original Go, you can connect the USB-C directly to your computer. It seems to me like not a terribly fast offload. Like it feels like either this is USB 2 or it's maybe still having to go wirelessly from the camera to the case out the cable. I'm not sure how that works, but it's not a super fast offload. It's also, when you're using the desktop app, not a super fast export either. But what I would most love to see is all of these app features like stabilization and focal length and that kind of stuff. I would love to see those implemented as plugins to Final Cut, Premiere, DaVinci, because for me, having another piece of software between the footage and Final Cut is a barrier I don't want to deal with, and in my mind just feels unnecessary. The biggest issue for me with this camera, and in particular on this trip, is that the audio is, well, it's not great. Sometimes you can get really clear sounding voices and you can be surprised at how well it picks you up.
I just realized I'm shooting all this footage for a YouTube video.
But other times it just gets swallowed up by the wind, and it's really hard to predict just when that will and won't happen. So I wanted to show you just what that sound sounds like in a bunch of different environments, and in order to do that, let me tell you about today's sponsor. This video right here is brought to you by Storyblocks. Storyblocks is an incredible subscription platform that offers over 1 million stock video assets that are completely royalty free. So for a video like this one, where I actually needed some clips of Algonquin Provincial Park in the winter from the air, well, Storyblocks has me covered.
Now, beyond just the incredible footage that they also have access to tons of awesome sound effects and songs and graphic elements and all sorts of things to spice your edits up. What I love most is that with their unlimited all-access plan...
That's too windy. What I love most is that with their unlimited all-access plan, you don't have to just download 1 or 2 clips. You could download 10 or 20 or 30 and just see which one you like best. And you're not sacrificing quality for quantity.
So if you're looking to make more videos, whether you're like a person or a small business, thank you so much. Have a good one. They've got an affordable subscription plan to help you out. If you want to learn more, click the link in my description down below. Storyblocks, you guys are the greatest. Thank you for existing. I love you forever. Goodbye.
Battery life is an interesting one because it's both awful and kind of great. Okay, if you take the camera out, put it on your head or whatever and record in the pro video mode, I mean, I don't know how long exactly it's gonna last, but I know you can watch the battery level drain pretty quickly, particularly if it's connected to your phone. However, what I found is that when in the case, the battery life hasn't bothered me even a little bit. In fact, the real issue is that 30 gigabytes of storage. Every single time when I go out shooting, I'll run out of internal storage before the battery dies, which is good for the battery, I guess, but bad for the internal memory. Furthermore, what I really do love about this is that, unlike a phone, you can find places to mount this easily, even with just this. Forget about the accessories. Here's how I'm going to use this camera. I'm definitely going to be using it for Instagram stories, which is convenient because then I can also use those Instagram stories horizontally in a YouTube video later if I want to. But really, the primary way I'm going to use this is as my family camera. I'm just going to keep it in my pocket all the time. And if something cool happens, I can open it and hit record. And I know this seems a bit silly, but I love that there's not a screen on it, because if I'm just capturing life, I don't want to do it from behind a screen. I want to see life and get the moment, but I don't want to be, So expect to see footage from this camera in, probably every video I make for the foreseeable future, just because it's so easy to get shots from